Hello everyone, Interact back here again with another entity education video. In this video we'll be covering a very beloved killer in the community due to just how cute she is when she gets stunned, Amanda Young, probably better known as the Pig. As always, there will be timestamps up on the screen right now, and also down in the description of the video if you want to skip around to certain sections. The Pig has the same base stats as all other killers, the movement speed of 115% or 4.6 meters per second, a terror radius of 32 meters, all of that good stuff. Things get a little more interesting, as they commonly do, once we move into discussing Amanda's power. Speaking of which, let's talk about Amanda's power, or I guess I should say multiple powers, since she technically has two. Let's start off by talking about the one that doesn't require too much of a lengthy and complicated explanation of how it functions, her crouching and dash attacks. You can press left control, on PC of course, I do not know the controls for console, by default to enter your crouch, where you will have a significantly lowered profile to the ground. This will take 1.3 seconds to do by default, and will slow your movement speed down to 92%, or 3.68 meters per second, so slower than a normal survivor's running speed. On screen I will have a clip of a glitch that I had happen during a game that kind of easily demonstrates how much slower you're actually moving, since when you are crouched it can be hard to tell that you're actually moving significantly slower. The crouch will also slowly erase your red stain and terror radius, much like the insidious perk, over a period of about 4 seconds. And this will happen in reverse when you uncrouch. Once crouched, you can either hit left control again to uncrouch, or hold down mouse 1 to charge up and unleash an ambush attack. This ambush, according to data mining, will make you go at 160% speed, or 6.4 meters per second, and you will go for a distance of roughly about 16 meters over a period of roughly 2-ish seconds, assuming you're holding the forward movement key and going as fast as you can. You do have full control over the ambush, meaning you can turn around to juke, go around corners easily, etc. Charging up the ambush attack is much like the Hillbilly's chainsaw, where once you hit a full charge, it will unleash the attack. There is no way to cancel it once it goes off. Charging up your ambush attack will take 1 second to do by default, and you will unleash a roar roughly midway through the attack, alerting nearby survivors that you are, in fact, attempting a dash, and you are coming to stab them, and also making your terror radius and red stain reappear almost immediately. If you fail to land your ambush attack, you will enter a cooldown period of about 2.3 seconds based on the testing that I ran. Wow, that was pretty complicated. What do you mean you were going to get started off with the easier to explain power, I hear you asking? Well, let's talk about Amanda's other power, her reverse bear traps. You will start off each match with a default of 4 reverse bear traps that you can use throughout the match as you see fit. Once you have downed a survivor, you can choose to press mouse 2 to put a reverse bear trap on the downed survivor's head, giving them a fancy hat that they can wear and show off to their friends. From here on out, I'll probably be referring to reverse bear traps as RBTs, since it's a lot shorter and easier to say. Putting an RBT on a downed survivor will take you 3.3 seconds to do by default, and will vacuum the survivor to the location, meaning you can slightly pull them away from pallets to make it so they can't get pallet saved and other various nonsensical things. By themselves, RBTs will do nothing other than increase the fashion points of any survivor wearing them, since they are extremely stylish, and also highlight the jigsaw boxes spawned around the map. Once a generator becomes powered, and a survivor is wearing the latest in Gucci metal headwear, the reverse bear trap will become powered. This means that it will start to give off an audible beep that will grow in frequency as the survivor comes ever closer to the ending of the timer. Once the timer runs out, it's game over. The reverse bear trap will snap, doing some extremely gruesome things to the survivor that thankfully behavior hasn't actually animated, probably because it would take a really long time to actually do the animations for each individual survivor, and also mostly because it wouldn't look all that great to ratings boards. Survivors will have 150 seconds, or 2.5 minutes, by default to search through the 4 jigsaw boxes spawned around the map to try and find the key to their RBT on their head and get it off. All survivors will be able to see roughly how long they have before their RBT goes off, as the clock will kind of tick down. However, the killer will just see that the power is lit up in red, much like how Deep Wounds functions, where the killer is not actually allowed to see the timer. Searching through a jigsaw box for the key will take a survivor 12 seconds by default, and will give them skill checks randomly during the searching. These skill checks will act as normal skill checks, meaning that hitting a great skill check will give them 2% extra progress towards finishing the search, and failing a skill check will not only give the killer a noise notification, but will also regress their searching progress by 10%. This is really where the strength of the RBTs lies, in wasting survivors' time and keeping them off of generators and progressing the state of the match while they are running around searching for the keys to get their headgear off because they don't have any sense of fashion. Let's quickly cover a few intricacies of the RBTs before we get into dispelling the commonly held myth of how exactly they function. Firstly, if a survivor attempts to leave the match through an exit gate with a powered reverse bear trap on their head, the RBT will give them an extremely loud warning and extremely quick beeping before going off automatically if they foolishly decide to ignore the warnings. Survivors are, however, allowed to escape through the hatch with a reverse bear trap on, powered or not, at any time during the match. With the addition of the endgame collapse, RBTs are no longer automatically powered once the exit gates are, meaning that if you put an RBT on a survivor during the endgame collapse, it will not be powered, meaning they are free to walk out of the gate and keep their sweet hat to show off at the campfire after the match. Another quick thing to note is that if you are in a chase with a survivor who has a powered reverse bear trap on their head, their timer will be paused for the duration of the chase, meaning you should probably just focus on other survivors, but I'll cover more about the details of that in the how to play section of the video. Now let's get into dispelling that commonly held myth that I talked about how RBTs and jigsaw boxes function. It is not a percentage chance to get an RBT off your head at any given jigsaw box. This has been confirmed by the developers at Behavior a few times, but recently on a dev stream they talked about how it actually functions. I'll probably pull up a little drawing or something that I made, a little diagram to make this slightly easier to understand. Essentially, from my understanding of what they said during the developer stream, and this is just my interpretation, you'd have to actually ask one of the devs at Behavior to get a 100% factual representation of how it functions properly, is that a key is spawned for each reverse bear trap you start the match off with, so 4 by default. Let's say there's key 1, key 2, key 3, and key 4. These 4 keys are linked to each of your reverse bear traps, so for instance, key 1 goes to reverse bear trap 1, key 2 goes to reverse bear trap 2, etc. Then, each of these keys is randomly placed inside of a jigsaw box around the map, and multiple keys can be placed inside of a single jigsaw box, making it so you can't know exactly which box the final survivor needs to check, and then just, I guess, guard it until their head goes pop. So for instance, we'll say the keys are distributed like this diagram. If you put RBT1 on, let's say, a Dwight, and he checks this box here, we know that he's going to fail, since we know that key 1 is not in that box. Key 2 is in that box, but that goes to RBT2, not RBT1, which is what he has on his head. This means that it is not a 25% chance for a survivor to get the RBT off of their head on their first box checked. This isn't actually knowledge that you can take with you and apply during a match while you're actually playing it. It's just more of a discussion of how the mechanic actually functions. I hope this cleared up how exactly RBTs, keys, and jigsaw boxes function in Dead by Daylight instead of just being even more confusing than it already was. Now for something slightly less confusing, let's talk about the pig's add-ons, which are understandably kind of split up between her 2 powers. We start off at the common tier with Workshop Grease. Workshop Grease will slightly increase the odds of a skill check triggering while a survivor is searching a jigsaw box. According to data mining, this means a 1% increase to the chances of triggering a skill check, which basically means nothing. Next up, we have Shattered Syringe, which will slightly decrease the ambush attack miss cooldown. Based on my testing, this is a 20% reduction to your miss cooldown with your ambushes, bringing it down to 1.85 seconds. I double and triple checked my testing footage for this one, and did multiple tests, since the wiki claims it's a 25% reduction, but honestly the difference between a 20% and a 25% reduction is 0.125 seconds, so I'm not sure that it really matters all that much. Then we have another ambush add-on with John's Medical File. John's Medical File will slightly decrease the ambush attack charging time. This means a 50% reduction to the charging time of your ambush, which doesn't sound very slight to me, bringing it down to 0.5 seconds, half of a second. And the final common add-on for Amanda is Combat Straps. These will slightly decrease the time it takes you to crouch. This means a 0.3 second reduction to your crouching time, bringing it down to 1 second. Moving on to Amanda's uncommon add-ons, we start off with Videotape. Videotape will slightly decrease your ambush attack charge time, and also slightly decrease your ambush attack's miss cooldown. This is just a combination of the previous two common add-ons, Shattered Syringe and John's Medical File. This means it will reduce your ambush attack charging time by 50%, bringing it down to 0.5 seconds, and reduce your miss cooldown of your ambush attacks by 20%, bringing the cooldown down to 1.85 seconds. Next up, we have the first in a long line of add-ons that make your traps apply something to survivors while they keep them on, Utility Blades. Utility Blades will make any survivor with a fancy hat on suffer from the hemorrhage status effect, making them bleed more frequently. Following that, we have another horrible RNG add-on, Razor Wire. Razor Wire will moderately increase the chance of survivors getting a skill check while searching a jigsaw box. According to data mining, this means a 2% increase. Once again, pretty much worthless. Next up, we have a decently useful add-on for a change, Last Will. Last Will simply give you an extra reverse bear trap to use during your match. That's it. Nice, simple, easy. And we end our uncommon add-ons with another Your Reverse Bear Traps Give Status Effects add-on with Face Mask. Face Mask will make it so any survivor with a fancy hat on will suffer from the blindness status effect until they remove their reverse bear trap. Moving on to Amanda's rare add-ons, we have a few more status effect add-ons, starting with Slow Release Toxin. Slow Release Toxin will make any survivor with a reverse bear trap on suffer from the exhaustion status effect. And then we have Rusty Attachments. Rusty Attachments will make any survivor with a reverse bear trap on suffer from the mangled status effect, slowing down the speed at which they are healed. Following up on those two, we have Jigsaw's Annotated Plan. Jigsaw's Annotated Plan will increase the amount of available jigsaw boxes by 1, essentially making survivors waste a bit more time searching for the correct jigsaw box, in theory of course. It will also moderately increase the reverse bear trap's death timer. This means an extra 20 seconds will be added to their death timer, bringing it up to 170 seconds or 2 minutes and 50 seconds. And next up we have Interlocking Razor. Interlocking Razor will tremendously increase the penalty for a failed skill check while searching a jigsaw box. This means a 50% increase to the penalty for a failed skill check while searching a jigsaw box, bringing it up to an insane 60% regression in progress for failure. This is the only time I've ever seen tremendously actually mean something that I would think would be tremendous. The only issue with this add-on is, who in the world is missing these easy skill checks on jigsaw boxes? And yes, I did test this add-on. Here are the raw comparison photos on screen. You can see I measured out how many pixels the progress bars had before and after a failed skill check. Sometimes I swear, the things I do in the name of figuring out what these dumb add-ons actually mean, it boggles the mind. And the final rare add-on for Amanda is Bag of Gears. Bag of Gears will slightly increase the time it takes survivors to search jigsaw boxes, and slightly decrease the amount of time it takes you to put a reverse bear trap on a downed survivor. This means it will take survivors 14% longer to search a jigsaw box, making it take 13.68 seconds, and it will reduce the time it takes you to put the RBT on a survivor by 15%, making it take only 2.8 seconds. Now let's move on to Amanda's very rare add-ons, where we have some pretty basic add-ons, starting with Tampered Timer. Tampered Timer will moderately reduce the reverse bear trap's death timer. This means a reduction of 30 seconds to the death timer, bringing it down to only 2 minutes. Following up on that, we have another very basic add-on, Jigsaw's Sketch. Jigsaw's sketch will increase the amount of jigsaw boxes spawned on the map by 1. Once again, this essentially makes it a little bit harder for survivors to get their reverse bear traps off, since they have, in theory, a lower chance of finding the correct box. In theory, of course. This is all just theoretical. They'll probably still get it off on their first try anyways. And then we have Bag of Gears' older brother, Crate of Gears. Crate of Gears will considerably increase the amount of time it takes survivors to search jigsaw boxes, and moderately decrease the amount of time it takes to put RBTs on survivors. This means it will take survivors 30% longer to search jigsaw boxes, bringing it up to 15.6 seconds, and decrease the amount of time it takes you to put the RBTs on by 30%, bringing it down to 2.3 seconds. And Amanda's final very rare add-on is one that I really don't even understand, to be honest, but maybe it's just my lack of experience with playing the pig. Amanda's Secret. Amanda's Secret is a secret to me, but it will also disable your ability to see the aura of your jigsaw boxes, and will give you a noise notification whenever a survivor removes an RBT, and show you the aura of survivors who are attempting to remove RBTs for 6 seconds. Now let's talk about the pig's ultra rare add-ons. She does actually have them. Woohoo! Starting off with Rules Set Number 2. Rules Set Number 2? Rule? I don't know. Will disable the survivor's ability to see the aura of jigsaw boxes until their RBT is actually powered and active and ticking down and beeping at them loudly. This will make it significantly harder for survivors to get their RBTs off before they actually are under pressure, potentially wasting a lot of their time if they attempt to get it off before it actually becomes activated, because they'll have to memorize which boxes they have and haven't used and where the boxes even are. And the final ultra rare add-on for Amanda is Amanda's Letter. Amanda's Letter is one of the better ultra rare designs I've actually seen in the game, in my opinion, since it's very transformative in your playstyle, which, as I've said before, is what I look for in something that is an ultra rare add-on, something that is very transformational. Amanda's Letter will reduce your available RBTs by 3, giving you only a single RBT to use by default, and reduce the amount of available jigsaw boxes by 2, making there be only 2 spawned by default. The upside to this is that while you are crouched, it will show you the aura of survivors within 12 meters of you. I'm not exactly sure why the wording on this add-on is kind of off, saying that it shows you the outlines of survivors, but behavior is fairly inconsistent when it comes to the phrasing of things in Dead by Daylight. This add-on turns you into more of an ambush killer than a stalling killer with reverse bear traps. It does lead to a kind of hilarious and slightly mean-spirited build that I'll talk about later in the meme section of the video. Now let's get into some tips for playing Amanda. I'm going to be extremely upfront and honest before I begin this. The pig is my least played killer in Dead by Daylight, so I'm probably not the most confident in how she should be played, and I'm going to give probably very broad tips for how to play her. I'm not going to get super specific like I have with other killers. I have watched much better pig players than myself, however, so I can give some advice based on what I've seen them do and what I've heard them say about how you should be playing the pig. If you are a pig main, and you have hundreds or thousands of hours playing the pig, please feel free to leave a comment giving advice that I might have left out, or critiquing what I say in this section if I say something that is just kind of not the common knowledge of pig mains. I'll try to leave a heart on it and pin it or something like that if possible, so check the comment section and you might be able to find advice that I either didn't know about or something that I said wrong, and they're going to critique me and fix what I said wrong. My first piece of advice would be to not rely too much on crouching to sneak around the map. You don't want to be crouching to sneak around all the time. While it is nice to not have a terror radius and be able to sneak up on survivors and ambush them, the slowed movement speed and the reduced point of view make it very difficult to actually find and catch up to survivors. If you know that there are going to be survivors in a certain area, either because they just finished a generator, you saw their aura with something, they just unhooked a survivor, something along those lines, crouching down to sneak up on them is going to be a pretty good idea, since they won't be able to tell that you're near them or where you're coming from. You're going to want to use objects in the environment to block line of sight to survivors if possible, since you aren't technically invisible while crouched, despite what Claudette mains might try to tell you. Getting into the habit of knowing when is a good time to crouch to sneak up on survivors and when it's best to just run at them normally will serve you really well if you plan on playing a lot of Pig, as it tends to do with most killers, honestly. Another major thing that you're going to want to get a feel for and get used to is using your ambush at shorter loops. Obviously, this won't work at all loops, some of them are just too long, but some of them are short enough that a dash attack will actually be able to land a hit before they drop a pallet. This is true for most non-structure loops. Most of just the typical out in the middle of the world, tiny little barrels on both sides. Pallets are the ones you're going to be doing this on. You're typically not going to be doing it in larger buildings or at jungle gyms, things like that. The way that I've always seen this done is to make sure that you are at the pallet when you crouch and begin your ambush attack, so you know that the survivor doesn't actually have the pallet to use once they hear you roar and you start dashing at them. Then you're going to need to do a little bit of prediction on which side they're going to be favoring and dash in that direction. You might need to do a little bit of a change up every now and then. Sometimes you may see the survivor just leave the pallet loop, which is fine. Just follow them with your dash and kind of eat the cooldown. This at least makes them leave the pallet loop behind, possibly putting them out in the open, where you can catch up to them and get a free hit, or making them go to another unsafe loop that you can once again attempt to dash attack at. Other than getting good at ambush attacking at loops, you're going to just want to get good at general mind games for longer loops. This is something you're going to need to get a hang of and really commit to muscle memory if you plan on playing a weaker killer such as the Pig. I really hate saying this in pretty much every video since there are a lot of weak killers in the game, but there are only really a few killers that are considered top tier that don't need to rely on mind games as much since their abilities just kind of allow them to ignore loops. Amanda's ambush attack can sort of help with loops, but the setup and precision required to actually make it work might more often than not hurt you, and this is kind of what keeps her from being one of the best killers in the game. She does have a top tier stun sound effect, however, so she has that going for her. With all of the talk about looping and ambush attacking out of the way, let's talk about the other portion of your power, your RBTs. When should you be using them? Well, given the recent change to RBTs in the 2.7 patch that introduced the endgame collapse, the answer has become a lot simpler. In my opinion, you're going to want to just throw traps on survivors' heads as soon as possible after downing them. Hopefully this means you can have at least a few traps out before the first few generators are getting finished. This will waste the survivors' time as they try to search for their keys and get the RBTs off their heads, slowing the game down in your favor. It may also have a nice added benefit of keeping survivors from actually finishing generators, which brings me to my next point. You may, in your games, see a lot of survivors getting generators very close to being finished, almost 99%ing them, and not actually finishing them as long as their teammates have RBTs on their heads, because they don't want to put their teammates under too much pressure. This can work in your favor, since you can kick the generators to start regressing them, and survivors probably won't be hanging around the generators to just tap the regression off immediately. This can also buy you a little bit of time, slowing the game down in your favor, if it ends up working. You could try to hold out on putting RBTs on survivors' heads to make the last few generators even slower, but honestly, I don't really think that doing anything other than using them as soon as possible is really advisable, especially with the changes from the endgame collapse patch. Now, let me talk about something that might be a bit controversial of me to say, but I've never shied away from saying things like this in my videos. Honestly, I feel survivors are, with most things, extremely entitled when it comes to how they view reverse bear traps and chases functioning. While yes, chasing a survivor with a reverse bear trap on does pause the timer, this doesn't mean you should just ignore survivors who have RBTs on. Your RBTs are there to slow the game down, not actually really net you kills. If you do end up getting kills from them, great, awesome, free kill. More often than not, you'll probably go entire days without seeing a single game over score event happen on your screen, meaning that someone actually died to the reverse bear trap. It's called a game over score event in case you've actually never seen it before. I am by no means saying you should be tunneling people who have reverse bear traps on, unless you're using them for a certain playstyle or something that I'll talk about later in the meme section. I'm just saying that if you see an injured survivor with a reverse bear trap walk right in front of you, you should probably just go chase them and hit them if you don't have anything else to do. They might complain in the end of the match and be like, oh, you're tunneling the traps. They're being dumb. Do not worry about what they say. They're being stupid. Now with all the tips and the little ramble at the end out of the way, let's talk about your teachable perks that you'll be getting from leveling up the Pig. At level 30, you'll unlock the Teachable for probably my favorite perk in the game, Hangman's Trick. Hangman's Trick is a classic behavior perk that gives you a solution to a problem that doesn't even exist anymore. Hangman's Trick will make it so any hook destroyed by sabotage from a survivor or by sacrificing a survivor on it will automatically repair itself after 30/20/10 seconds. It will also give you a noise notification whenever someone starts attempting to sabotage a hook. If you're using this perk on Trapper, it will also reduce the repair time of your sabotaged bear traps by 60 seconds. This perk would have been top tier back in 2016 or early 2017 when the meta was survivors just sabotaging every hook on the map, because back then they didn't automatically respawn after a few minutes and would remain broken for the entire match, which forced killers to use basically only the basement to ever kill anybody. These days, however, barely anyone sabotages, so this perk is just a few years too late to the party. Rambling aside about that, at level 35 you'll unlock the Teachable for the perk Surveillance. Surveillance used to be one of the most worthless perks in the game, but it got buffed a little while back into being just kind of a low-tier-ish perk instead of completely worthless, like Hangman's Trick. Surveillance will give you the auras of generators while they regress. Any regressing generator, meaning you've kicked it, will be highlighted in white. Once the regression ends, meaning that a survivor is touched to stop the regression, it will be highlighted in yellow for 8/12/16 seconds, giving you some idea of where survivors are messing around with generators as long as you're kicking them frequently. It will also increase the audible noises from survivors repairing generators by 8 meters, making it easier for you to hear the loud repair noises from survivors working on generators unless they're smart enough to tap the generator to make sure no noise happens, or they're running technician for some odd reason. And finally, at level 40, you will unlock the Teachable for the perk Make Your Choice. Make Your Choice will make it so that if a survivor unhooks another survivor, and you are at least 32 meters away, the unhooking survivor will be exposed for 40/50/60 seconds. Make Your Choice also has a cooldown of 40/50/60 seconds. This perk is great on highly mobile killers who can make excellent use of the exposed status, such as the Spirit, the Hag, Wraith, Nurse, etc. On a killer such as the Pig or any killer who doesn't really have high mobility, it's not really going to do that much for you most of the time, since you won't be able to get back to the hook almost immediately and down them. Now let's talk about some perk builds for the Pig. As always, we'll get started with a perk build for new players, assuming you've only put points into the Pig, and therefore only have her perks and the base killer perks, and then move on to the meta perk build, and round it out at the end with a few meme builds. Normally we would discuss a that build, meaning a toxic build that is somewhat prevalent in the community that this killer can utilize, but honestly I couldn't really think of one for the Pig. Starting off with the new player build, your perk setup might look something along the lines of this: Whispers, Sloppy Butcher, Surveillance, and Make Your Choice. There honestly aren't that many good perks baseline for killers, so even though I talked about how Make Your Choice isn't all that great for the Pig because she lacks that mobility, you may still be able to make it work since it does last for 1 minute, and 1 minute is enough time to maybe find the survivor that unhooked. Sloppy Butcher is, as it always is, there to slow down the game by making healing take longer. Whispers will help you know where you should be looking for survivors and where there aren't going to be any survivors to help save time, so you can maximize the amount of time you're actually spending chasing survivors and getting them off of generators. And Surveillance will also help you have some idea of where survivors might be working on generators that you have regressed. Now moving on to our meta build. Honestly, I'd say that you should probably just run the typical M1 meta build for killers: Barbecue and Chili, Hex Ruin, Enduring, and Spirit Fury. This might be a little bit contentious, honestly, since I know a lot of players tend to have different perks, perk builds, and playstyles for the Pig, but there aren't really that many Pig mains that are like high profile that I could, copy a build from. The only high profile Pig main that I know of is Psycho Scorpion Z, I'm not sure. A Twitch link will be up on the screen right now and down in the description if you want to check him out. He's an amazing Pig main. He has too many hours played as the Pig, and also recently became a Fog Whisperer for Dead by Daylight, so congrats to him for that. The build that he chooses to run is Monitor and Abuse, Brutal Strength, Whispers, and Enduring. You'd have to ask him why he chooses to run these perks, but in essence they're roughly the same as the meta build that I gave. Brutal and Enduring get you through pallets easier, and Whispers is also a great tracking perk, much like Barbecue. Brutal Strength also helps you kick generators if survivors are putting them at 99%, making them regress a little bit faster because you kick them quicker, I guess. The one major outlier here is Monitor and Abuse, but I believe I understand the theory behind it. If you see that Whispers is lit up and going off, the reduced tear radius allows you to crouch down and lose your tear radius through the natural insidious effect of crouching and sneak up on the survivors to either grab them or land an ambush attack before they even hear your tear radius. Also, as always, the increased FOV outside of chases helps you find survivors a little bit easier. This could just be me looking a little too hard into his perk selection. I'm pretty sure he's been using this build since before the pig nerf, where they made her tear radius 32 meters up from 28 meters, and maybe he just didn't change his perks because he couldn't be bothered to. Once again, you'd really have to ask him. This is just me kind of speculating on why he runs these perks. Talking about some other perks you might consider running, obviously Brutal Strength, Whispers, and Monitor and Abuse, as I just covered them. If one of the best pig mains in the game is running these perks, there has to be a good reason why you'd run them on the pig. I just possibly am not privy to the knowledge of why. Discordance is another decent perk you might want to consider running, letting you know when multiple survivors are working on a generator, allowing you to know that you should probably crouch and either try to grab one of them off of it or ambush them if possible. Hex Haunted Ground is always nice for covering up your ruined totem and possibly snagging you a few instant downs if they end up cleansing the wrong totem. Pop Goes the Weasel might actually be a pretty decent perk on the pig if you think survivors are going to be trying to 99% generators, since you can get maximum value out of it. Just know that it only lasts for 30 seconds after hooking a survivor, and you don't really have the best mobility to make full use of it if a generator is all the way across the map. I really wish they'd buff this perk already. And the final suggestion I would have would be probably Save the Best for last. It's always a very nice perk to run on mainly M1 killers, since the cooldown reduction on successful attacks can help out a lot. If you're going to be ambushing a lot more than just normal M1 hitting, this perk is probably just a hard pass for you. It really just depends on your playstyle as to whether you're going to see benefits from Save the Best for last or not. A perk you do not want to be running, and one that I see a lot of people wrongly trying to use on the pig, is Hex Huntress's Lullaby. Huntress Lullaby, I always say that wrong. I can see why people would think it would be great. They have to hit skill checks on jigsaw boxes, so why wouldn't it be sweet, huh? Well, sadly, jigsaw box skill checks are not affected by Lullaby. I'm not sure why, but if I had to wager a guess, behavior probably thought it would be too overpowered or something. Normally right now we'd cover a that build, but I honestly don't even think the pig has one. None of her add-ons are super overpowered or toxic or anything like that, so we'll just move on to some meme builds instead. Starting off the meme builds, we'll start with one that I enjoy kind of running probably more than I should. I don't really think it's that great of a build in the long run, but I like it. It's the debuff build. You're going to want to bring your favorite perk setup, as is typical with these meme builds, and then the add-ons such as Slow Release Toxin, Rusty Attachments, Face Mask, etc. You might see where this is going. Basically, you're just turning your reverse bear traps into a way to permanently put debuffs on survivors who have them attached, kind of like the Doctor's add-ons. This makes any survivor with a reverse bear trap on their head a much easier target to catch and hook, though you might get some hate messages since, as I said, survivors seem to have this notion that if they have a reverse bear trap on, they're just untouchable and you should never chase them and ignore them the entire match, and it's silly. The other meme build that I could think of, and one that was almost enough to be a that build, is the "Do you want to play a game?" pig build. That was a horrible impression, I'm very sorry, if you're a fan of Saw. The only reason that it wasn't the that build for this video is because it's mostly just like a joke and a coin flip as to whether it even works, and if it does work, it's not even that great. It's also pretty flavorful since Amanda in the Saw movies tended to kind of cheat and make her traps not actually escapable or winnable for the victims, but I'm not a huge Saw nerd, so I don't know. Once again, you're going to want to bring your favorite perk setup, and then the add-on Amanda's Letter and probably like Tampered Timer or something for good measure. Essentially, what you're going to want to do is find a survivor that you really, really want to die to a reverse bear trap head explosion, and put your single reverse bear trap on them. Then you're going to want to find one of the 2 jigsaw boxes on the map and crouch in front of it, blocking them off from being able to search it. If you've guessed correctly, they will die eventually very slowly to the reverse bear trap, or they'll get out through the hatch, as has happened to me in the past. If you've guessed incorrectly, they'll just get it off their head and you've wasted a whole lot of your time. This build is a coin flip, as I said, and it takes a solid 2 minutes for them to die if you do bring Tampered Timer, or 2.5 minutes if you bring some other add-on. You do get the cool crouching aura reading part of Amanda's letter, though, so even if it fails, I guess that's kind of nice. Just know that this build is not going to be winning you every single game, because it'll only affect one survivor, and the other survivors might just not even care in the slightest. And that's it for this episode of Entity Education, covering Amanda Young, probably better known as the Pig. The next video will be covering the thick boy himself, the man with two names, Kenneth, air quotes, Jeffrey Hawk, and air quotes, Chase, probably better known as the Clown. As always, thank you very much for watching. All of my social media links are up on the screen and down in the description. I'm just not even going to bother going through all of them anymore. It just takes too long. Feel free to subscribe here on YouTube and leave a like on the video. If you want to see more in the future, you can leave a comment with your favorite pig build or anything that I said that was stupid or wrong. I am completely open to constructive criticism. If you think something looks bad or I should do something a different way, please feel free to tell me that. I went to art school. I know how to take criticism properly and implement it in the future. I also did try something slightly different with the add-ons, so tell me if you think that looked cool or if you like the other way better. I do stream Dead by Daylight every week on my Twitch channel if you want to see if I'm actually good at this game or not, or if I'm just all talk. The schedule for the streams are posted in the under the Twitch stream page thing. I don't know what it's called. Thank you once again for watching. As always, I do truly appreciate all the support I've gotten with this series. I will see you in the next video with my favorite boy, the thick boy himself, the Clown. Goodbye for now.